Let's go live. Yes, we are live. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It feels like Friday. I literally feel like I'm running on Friday time today, and it's not. I have to keep reminding myself it's Thursday. But hello, everybody. Lovely to see all of you. I'm really, really excited that today I have one of my best friends, Anna Parker-Naples, who is the podcast expert in the UK and internationally. And Anna helps entrepreneurs, experts, and emerging leaders to really stand out by helping them to launch, grow, and monetize their message through podcasting. Now, it's a little bit serendipitous that just today, or yesterday, in fact, last night, we reached our first 100,000 downloads on the In Her Financial Shoes podcast. So it's a little bit serendipitous that the person that's helped us to reach that milestone is with us talking about how to launch a podcast to explode your profits. So welcome, Anna. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Hey, welcome. Thank you, Catherine. I was going to say welcome to you, but you're already here. Thank you. And it's such good news to hear about your downloads. It's an incredible achievement. So massive well done for In Her Financial Shoes.
Thank you. Thank you. So Anna, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I help people to get their messages out there. And the reason that I do that is that 4 years ago, I kind of had this moment of awakening, if you like, that actually I'd gone from rock bottom to literally standing on the red carpets in Hollywood, winning multiple awards for audio, and realizing so many people feel that they can't achieve, that they can't get the money that they want, they can't make a difference in their industry or to themselves. And I felt really strongly that I wanted to help people unlock their potential. And I kind of came into the whole online world and started building a profile. And that's when you and I met. And partway along that journey, it dawned on me that the thing that I know about standing on my head is audio, and that podcasting at the same time was really starting to kick off as an incredible platform to build your profile. So suddenly my work about visibility and my work in audio collided. And so now we help people to launch really impactful podcasts that become chart toppers, but that fuel their business. I'm really passionate that it's great if you have a podcast that does well, but actually you want to make sure it brings in the profits as well.
Yeah, fabulous. And today we're going to do quite a deep dive, actually. We're going to, and if you're listening to this while we're streaming this live, then please feel free to add any comments below, and we will use those questions to help you to think about, is this the time for you to launch your own podcast? And we've also got something very special to share with you at the end of this video, or if you're listening to this on the podcast, which will go on to our podcast tomorrow, we've got something very special to share with you at the end. So Anna, can we talk about the opportunities that exist for podcasting, and how can podcasting help people to grow their audience, grow their impact, and actually help them with their visibility, with their message?
Okay, so what I'm going to say is that podcasting right now is the fastest growing medium in the world. It's growing at an exponential rate. To put that in context, at the end of 2019, there were only 800,000 podcasts. Now, just 14 months later, there are very nearly 2 million podcasts. And people say, well, if there's so many podcasts, why would I start? There's too many people doing it. But what I want to put that in context to is the fact that over on YouTube, there are now something like 35 million live channels. And nobody thinks it's stupid to start a YouTube channel. We know it makes sense. But over in podcasting, you can really elevate your status, get in front of the right audience, because the podcast directories work like powerful search engines. But at this point, Catherine, I kind of want to turn the tables on you, because you've been podcasting now for almost 2 years. I believe it's almost 2 years. And you just hit this amazing milestone. So I'm curious to hear what difference it's made for you.
Yeah, great question. So interestingly for us, I would say that the two biggest impacts or outcomes that we've seen, the first one, which is the whole reason why I launched my podcast in the first place, was when I first started my business, I wanted to help everybody. And I still do. My mission is to equip and prepare 1 million women to be financially resilient. So the podcasting for me was my way of providing value for people that didn't have the money to invest in some of my paid services and programs. And that was really important for me. I had this big mindset block that, well, I surely can't charge X for my services, because I wanted to help everybody. So that was the whole reason why I launched my podcast. When I initially launched it, I didn't launch it properly. I had no idea really what I was doing. This is before I met Anna. I still managed to reach number 3 in the charts. But we've been able to actually relaunch on several occasions and hit various chart toppings. Last week, we were in the top 10 for the business charts again, and because we know now what to do. But for me, the initial purpose was just to have that impact, to create that ripple effect, to help us to reach our mission and our vision. But what actually happened is it positioned me as somebody of authority in my field. And what's gone on to happen with the podcast is that we've been quite fortunate in a way that there's not many female financial experts podcasting. So we've naturally picked up some incredible PR. I mean, in the last 12 months, we've had the Times, the Telegraph, the Financial Times, Mary Claire just this week, the Guardian, the Sun, the Daily Mail, Forbes. You know, we've had so much PR off the back of the podcast, some of which we've not even asked for. You know, we had the Reader's Digest at the end of last year. We had Good Housekeeping, Prima magazine, or people just writing articles about us because we were one of the few people podcasting about money. So I really believe that the 2 biggest impacts for us, and obviously the impact of that is that builds our brands, it builds our authority, it builds our financial benefits, because we're obviously attracting more people listening to the podcast. So that trickles down through into the financial impact. But for me, it was always the focus on how can we serve this many people. And I'll be really honest, podcasting for me was a slightly easier route than showing up and doing videos as well, because I didn't have to show my face. And I actually initially started the podcast by setting up a radio show. I did a local radio show for 5 months before I did a podcast. So in answer to your question, Anna, those were the 2 biggest outcomes that we've seen off the back of the podcast launch.
And none of that is to be sniffed at. And a lot of that wouldn't have happened had you not stood out in your industry. Now, you were talking about being one of the only women podcasting about money. And this is true in almost every niche that there is out there in terms of podcasting. There is still, out of every 3 podcasts, only 1 will be women. So men are still leading the way in podcasting, which is why I get really passionate about making sure that it's not just men, and I don't just work with women, but that everybody gets their voice heard, because I really do believe that podcasting is a way, yes, it positions you. Yes, it can help bring in customers, and yes, it can help increase your profits. But actually, fundamentally, I believe that we can have a ripple effect on the world by changing one listener's life at a time. And the way I see it, for example, in the field of, let's say, mindset or mindfulness, whichever, the more people speaking about that, the greater effect and greater change there will be in the world. And sometimes, even if someone has a similar show to you, that can actually be a good thing, because sometimes a listener needs to hear a particular message, a particular story delivered in a particular way at a particular time. And that's what our voices can do. And that's the real power of audio only content as opposed to watching a video. You can move people. When we talk about, does your ideal client resonate with you? Well, when we come to audio, you're literally feeling like you're on the same frequency. And that's when you can have quite an emotional and physical impact on people through them listening to good quality audio.
Yeah. What are some of the challenges that stop people from launching a podcast?
So people think that they're too busy, and that everything else in their business is more important. And actually, what I would urge people to reconsider right now is that if you don't join this platform in the next year or 2, that opportunity to stand out, to have an amazing chart-topping launch, and let's face it, once you've entered the charts once, you are always a chart-topping show. doesn't mean you have to be there forever, but you still got that credibility, that badge of authority. The other things that people say are that, you know, because I'm too busy, there's no way I could do a podcast, because they don't understand that there are some major ways that you can repurpose. So, for example, in my business, I will often do StreamYard interviews. So we're going live everywhere, but I'm very conscious that instead of chatting to the audience, we're creating a podcast episode. So that then the live then gets turned into audio, which then goes on the podcast, which then has show notes and transcriptions created, which then become blogs, which then have long-term search engine optimization capabilities. Things like quotes for Instagram, we will get them from things I've said out loud. So the graphics are all created. And so actually, in many ways, yes, the audio side can be a bit fiddly, but it doesn't have to be. If your recording environment is good enough, editing can be kept to a minimum.
Yeah, and I think on that note, I often get asked, like, how long does it take you to podcast? So we currently put out 1 podcast episode a week. We're about to go to 2. And I batch my interviews. So we've already got content up until March, but we didn't start doing that. We had sort of 6 or 7 in the bank, and then we sort of committed to doing 1 every week. But the great thing about podcasting is that, I mean, I literally sit here like we are now, record an episode, whether that's by myself or with a guest, and it then goes off to an editor. They edit the entire episode, pop it into a Google Dropbox kind of folder, and then it just goes straight onto the hosting platform. That's it. And then I have a VA, a virtual assistant, who then, as you just described, Anna, transcribes that. We use some transcribing technology. It's very low cost. We transcribe that into a blog. 3 of our blogs are already top on Google right now that have come off the back of podcast interviews. So it's a great way to leverage your time, but get your message out to as many people as possible. Yeah. I pay 30 quid a week for all of that work. It's not, you know, it's not expensive to get somebody else to do that for you.
So what I want to say about that in terms of leveraging the audio content, Google Podcasts has kind of entered the field last year to kind of go head to head with Apple and Spotify. And they've developed this, I don't know if it's an AI or a bot, I don't know what the correct term is, but they can now actually read the content of the audio, even if they never create a transcription or you never create a transcription. So in terms of positioning, so for example, Catherine, if you were going on many other shows talking about money and particular money and emotional behaviors around money, well, that would help your search engine optimization, even if no one ever created any show notes as a result of your episode. And that's really powerful. So in terms of standing out from the crowd, you can have those credibility badges very quickly, far quicker than sitting down to write a book. And you can connect with people in your industry, because when you have a podcast that's serving a niche audience, people want to get on your show because they have the same audience. And this is how you sort of see other entrepreneurs accelerating, because they're getting in front of the right audiences on other people's shows, but also there's this hidden ROI, hidden return on investment, which is actually the relationships that often flourish between hosts and guests and vice versa. And many a conversation happens before, during and after an episode recording, and also the relationship that builds, you know, after you've had the chat and after the episode has gone out, because you can access people far more easily when you say, I'd love you on my show.
Yeah,
because you're doing them a favor.
Yeah, I mean, and who doesn't love chatting? Who doesn't love chatting to people? I mean, especially right now where we're all seeking greater connection. You know, it's the easiest thing to do is just to show up on a Zoom call and have a chat with somebody, and then that becomes your content. It's just a great way of building your business. Yeah. So Anna, for anyone who's listening to this and thinking, okay, you've got me, I really want to launch a podcast this year. Could you maybe talk us through? I know you've got some things you want to share today. What can people do to get started?
So one of the things that I see people doing that I made the mistake with when I first started my very first podcast 3-4 years ago is just going, I'm going to start a podcast and I'm going to see how it does before I tell anyone about it. They haven't really stopped to think about, how is this going to feed my business? What do I want it to do for my profile? What do I want the listeners to do after they've listened, after I've excited them and got them interested? If you don't think about those things to start with, your podcast isn't going to be as effective for your business. Also, if you haven't got things right, like the wording, the description, some of the tags that go behind the scenes on a podcast, if you haven't got those right at launch, then you're not organically going to be found by your ideal listener. You might be, it'll be easy for the people who already know you, but not so much for the people who've never heard of Catherine Morgan and In Her Financial Shoes, or whatever your podcast name is. So I think taking it seriously and taking it as an important element of your business, as opposed to this little thing on the side that you're going to see how it does. It's one of the greatest mistakes people make. So I've kind of got an eight steps that I think are really important to get a podcast to launch successfully. So number one is planning. And that planning is about thinking what you're doing it for, who you want to reach, being really clear on not just your ideal client, but your perfect listener. Because really what we're doing is we're talking to one person at a time. It's an intimate relationship. So who is that ideal, that perfect listener for you? And it might be that it's not that nobody else would listen except that perfect listener. That's not how it works. But your content and your delivery becomes so much more clear because you know what the issues going on for them are. And that feeds into the name of your show, your artwork, the titles of each show, which really matter. The next thing then is about doing your research. So this is step 2, going and finding what you love about podcasts, what you hate about podcasts, what styles you like, what people in your industry are doing, what they're doing well, what they're missing, and what you think you could do better or differently. The amount of people, and hands up, I started a podcast without listening to a podcast when I first got started. The amount of people who say, I'm going to start a podcast, but I don't even know how you listen to a podcast. I've never listened to one. Well, first of all, understand how people are working this system who are doing it well. Because there's a difference. There is a difference between someone who's kind of winging it, picked up their phone and used a free app, and someone who's doing this with a level of intelligence and sophistication. And that sophistication doesn't mean it has to be the flashiest audio setup at all. It's just more the forethought that you want this to fuel your business and fuel your mission and your impact. The second thing then is about recording your audio, having above the bare minimum of requirement for your audio content. So this means having a good solid microphone. And that might be that you have a USB microphone that you plug straight into a computer. It might be that you have a good quality professional grade clip-on microphone that goes into your phone. But what I'm not telling you to do is to record directly onto your Mac or your PC. And I'm not telling you to record directly into your phone. Because as more people come onto the platform, there is a strong difference. You can hear it between those who've got a good enough setup and those that don't. And people actually make snap decisions in the first 5 seconds of listening to your content, which is often before you have even opened your mouth. What they're hearing is the noise in your studio, the silence, the dead noise. What they're hearing is whether or not you've got an intro that excites them, motivates them, and intrigues them, and making sure you've just not got dead space in your audio. So the next thing then is about editing. And this is kind of where I get a bit on my high horse about it, because I think a good show has to be edited well, but it doesn't have to be overly edited and produced.
And so listening to this and he's going to be like, oh yeah.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with it, because and this is what I find in the podcasting coaching space that I'm in. You either get business coaches who don't know about audio, who have done a podcast that's maybe not even doing that well, and then they're teaching you how to do it, but they don't really know. Or you've got real audio geeks, the technical geeks out there. Sorry to Catherine's editor, I don't know your background, but who love the audio and want to profess that it's got to be complicated and you've got to have this and you've got to have you don't. And the reason I know this is because I've worked in audio for the most of my adult life, and particularly from home studios, sort of a bit ahead of my time in my background in terms of using home studios. So in terms of, as far as I'm concerned, your podcast can be good enough in terms of editing if you've got a good sounding area. So it doesn't have to be anything like this, but that's not got hard flooring, that you're not near windows, you're not in your bathroom, it doesn't sound like it's all echoey. And you know how to highlight, copy and paste. And I think pretty much everybody listening knows how to do that. Now, of course, at the higher end of the scale, there are much more complex things that you can do. But really, to get started and to be good enough, that is what you need. So good editing, decent editing. The other thing then is about uploading and hosting it on a podcast platform. And there are many free platforms right now, but I never, ever recommend using a free hosting platform because one, they're unreliable, and two, you don't notice, but you actually give away your rights to some of the audio, and they have the ability to add adverts at any point over your content later on. And it's all in the small print. And I'm a big believer in podcast ads and sponsorship, but it's got to be the right message for the right audience that you've taken time, energy, and effort to build. So make sure
ones that you've chosen for your brand and for your business,
and are going to fit with your content. They're not just slapped in. So, for example, if right now there was an advert for, I don't know, a drill something that has nothing to do with what we're talking about, that would be really incongruous, and actually Catherine's listeners would probably turn off. So make sure you invest in a host, and this can be as little as $5 a month, but it's worth it. It's worth every penny. The next thing then is connecting it up to the right platforms, and a good host will help you to do this, but you want to make sure you're on Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify and Stitcher. They're the main ones, but there are many other smaller ones, and you want your podcast to go as far and wide as you possibly can. The next thing then is about creating assets from your podcast. So this is about, if you really want this to further your business, create the show notes, get it on your website, get those links and resources, get on great guests, and then you are able to create assets where you've got images that they're on so that they can co-promote it. Very often, even someone who isn't particularly willing to co-promote an episode, if you put a story on Instagram that they are tagged in, they will share that, even if they share nothing else. So create the assets around your show. So that for me would be images, quotes, which are images, audiograms, which are the little videos to promote your show, creating the things like emailing your list about your show, and so on and so forth, but making sure that you squeeze everything out of your podcast because it creates so many opportunities for you. And then the final thing, which is the one that many people overlook, is knowing how to launch your podcast. Because if you've put all this effort in, the worst thing you can do is launch it under the radar and not tell anyone about it until 2 months down the line just to see if anybody listened, because no one's going to listen. No one's going to listen unless you put that effort and attention and gusto on doing the launch. And so that's something that I'm really passionate about. And I talk about that a lot in my book. You've got to go at it with your own impact so that you can have wider impact on the rest of the world. So that's kind of my 8-step guidelines as to how to really get your podcast out there.
Yeah, great. That was so simple in terms of just following those steps. And if anyone's listening to this live right now and has any specific questions on any of those steps, then please feel free just to pop some questions in the chat box. How many podcasts now have you helped to get into the charts, Anna?
So we've now helped. So I run the podcast membership and I run the podcast agency. So between the two, it's nearly 160 in the last 12 months that I've helped become international chart-topping podcasts, which is pretty cool. Wow. That is very cool. I believe, certainly in the UK, I am the most prolific podcast coach out there. So it makes me feel really good to know, because many people who come to work with me and come into my membership, it's because they've got a really important message. Yes, they want to build a profile, but actually they want to make a difference. And a podcast can really do that. And that's not necessarily by having hundreds of thousands of downloads. That can actually be by serving a really niche audience. Really niche. I mean, I know podcasts where they've got maybe 200 regular listeners, but those listeners are bought into everything that they say. because they feel like they belong.
And I think that's it, isn't it? They become your super fans. I mean, most of the people that come into our paid programs come from our podcast, because we've been talking in their ear for, well, almost 2 years now. And I know, Anna, that this week you've been running a challenge, and you are about to, this evening, I believe, open up the doors to a very one-off opportunity for people to come into your membership, and you're going to be offering something very unique and very special this time round. And I did promise at the start of this, anyone who listens right until the end, we've got something very special to share. So I'm going to pop the link up to this in a second. Anna's actually given me a special link to share with my audience only. This is the first time this has actually gone live anywhere. And is your opportunity to come into Anna's world and for her to help you get your podcast launched. Now, I'm going to share this with you in a second. But if you're listening to this on the podcast, then I'll just be very transparent and disclose to you that I will be making a little bit of money myself for anyone who uses, my link. But in return for that, I'm going to be offering a bonus masterclass, which I'm going to share with you in a second. But Anna, just tell us a little bit about your program that's open this evening. If they want to join and launch their podcast, what are you going to help them with? How does this offer work?
We have in the podcast membership effectively 4 courses. One on how to start, plan, create and launch your show. Content then on how to grow your show, what to do once it's actually up there. Then how to monetize it, because there's lots of different avenue streams. And then we have content on how to be a really great guest. And actually today is the 1st year anniversary of me opening the podcast membership. It's hard to think that this exact time as we're recording it, I hadn't even opened the doors, and now I've helped all of these people to amplify their message. We decided that instead of having our usual monthly fee, which gives access to all of the trainings and workbooks and launch templates, that we would actually do something a little bit special. I work with a lot of 6, 7 and 8 figure business owners to get their podcasts out there at very high level consultancy. And that's the only way that so far people have been able to have my expert eye on what they're creating as they go through. So what we decided for this time around only, it's a very special anniversary offer, is to offer not only all of the content inside the membership, which is loads and loads of videos, literally a step-by-step process of how you launch and then grow and scale. But we're also offering 4 group coaching calls with me. So these will be me showing you the strategy, keeping you accountable, making sure you get your specific questions answered so that you can get that and that feedback on, will this artwork work? Is this title good enough? Am I getting this right? And actually make sure that in this quarter, your podcast gets out of the door. Because I feel very strongly that if you don't do it soon, you're going to miss that opportunity. So that's kind of bonus number 1. We're also giving away. I'm
going to get hands-on feedback from you and your team about their artwork, their title.
There will be 4 group Zoom calls, and you will be able to ask me anything about your show as you're designing and building it yourself. So you're getting that real-time feedback. Then we are giving away templates to create your own artwork that would fit in line with Apple's very stringent guidelines, so that we're speeding up that process of the design. So you would have to pop in your colors, your image, your fonts, but we've designed it all for you. And then the third thing that we're giving away as a bonus is the first time we've got a Trello board which maps out every week for 8 weeks exactly what you need to be doing at each stage, including when you tell your audience what, so that you can have a really great support crew around you by the time you launch. So as I said, we're opening this the only time we're planning to run this offer, and we're pretty excited about it because, as I say, we work at a very high level of consultancy in the agency, and this is the only way we've given for people to have access to the knowledge that we have within our team. So
just incredible. And I know it's a special anniversary offer for you, so congratulations on reaching your first big milestone for your podcast. And if you're listening to this and you want to grab your spot, then you can head over to the link that we've just shared on the screen if you're watching this live, and we'll drop the link to this on the podcast. It's the podcastmembership.com/Mills Catherine. That's my maiden name, Mills Catherine /annual-membership. When does that offer close, Anna?
So we're closing that on Monday, the 1st of February at 9 p.m. And then that offer will be gone off the table.
Incredible.
It's a question of, if you're interested in it, now is the time to take action.
And what's that worth? Like value-wise, what would that be worth to somebody if they wanted to?
The courses are in total. There are other people selling similar packages, so they are priced in total, all four of them together, at $4,497. So it's nearly $5,000. And then the Zoom calls with me, we reckon around $997, and then the other additionals as well. So in total, you're getting almost $6,000, which is what, £4,500 worth of content available to you the moment you sign up.
And what's the cost of the special anniversary offer?
So the anniversary offer is $970, which gives you 2 free months, as well as the 3 bonuses I talked about, which in pounds is approximately £710 for annual access and access to myself and my team.
Amazing, amazing value. And so what we've decided to do as well is I get asked so many questions about how did you launch your podcast, and how do you monetize? Because we now monetize our podcast. How do you monetize your podcast? And because we've just reached 100,000, we are going to give away a free deep dive masterclass with me directly for anyone who decides to join Anna's program using that link before Monday. And that will be in March. So it'll give you time to get in the program, get your podcast ideas submitted, get some feedback from Anna and her team on those calls, and then actually get a deep dive with me then about any launch-based questions that you have. We've run competitions to relaunch. We can talk you through those and just help to show you how we went from 0 to 100,000 downloads on our podcast. So that's only available to anyone who decides to purchase Anna's special anniversary bonus using that link. So just as a reminder, that's the podcastmembership.com/Mills-Catherine/annual-membership. So thank you so much, Anna. Do you have any last comments that you wanted to leave anybody with?
Just that the time is now. If you really want to make a difference to people and you want to do something that builds your business and builds your credibility quickly, I mean, both Catherine and I are sitting here. It's podcasts that have, in the last 2 years, helped us elevate our status and our profiles and all of those things that lead to PR, lead to generation of clients, and then ultimately lead to income. Then the time is now. If you wait a year, 2 years, you will have missed this opportunity that's sitting right in front of you.
Yeah, it's a little bit like Clubhouse too at the moment, right? Everyone's talking about Clubhouse.
Everyone's talking in Clubhouse.
Yes, in actual fact, I have to go shortly because we are actually talking in Clubhouse shortly. But thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this, wherever you're listening to this today. Thank you, Anna, for joining us. Lovely to see you again, and have a great rest of the week.
Yeah, take care.
Thanks, guys. Take care.